And welcome back to Flow FM. Here with me I have Mat McLaughlin, a battlefield guide and historian. Matt, we're going to be talking to you about ANZAC Day today. Obviously it's coming up very soon, but before we do, can you give us a little bit of background about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely, Dan. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm one of those people who's just been obsessed with history since I was a kid, and just something about the story of the ANZACs captivated me from a very young age, and I've been very lucky that I've been able to make it my career. So I grew up in a little town in the bush in a family that had served in previous wars, and as I grew older, I just wanted to learn more and more about the ANZACs, and then I was lucky to start visiting the battlefields, and I wrote a couple of books about it, and now it's my career is telling the stories of the ANZACs and leading people to actually walk in their footsteps. And it's a job that I love, and I wouldn't do anything else.
How are you going to be spending your ANZAC Day this year? Do you have any specific traditions, or do you like to keep things fresh from year to year?
Yeah, my ANZAC days are usually pretty busy these days, doing interviews and lots of media stuff, but I always enjoy getting out to a dawn service. I'm a big believer that you can't go and play two up and go and have a few beers with your mates unless you've done something to commemorate the day. So you have to get up and go to a dawn service or attend a march, and then you're entitled to go and kick back with a few beers and play two up. So that's what I like to do. I think it's a great Aussie day. It's a day when everyone comes together. But it's got a very serious undertone. So I think that it's a wonderful thing to do, to go and attend an early service, go and watch those veterans marching past to pay your respects, and then unwind a little bit with a few beers and a game of two up. So if I've got time, I'll certainly fit all those elements in on ANZAC Day. Now,
you mentioned that you're from a regional upbringing, a small country town. Can you give us a little bit of background about your ANZAC Day traditions growing up?
Yeah, I'm from West Wyalong in New South Wales, so a little town in the wheat belt, about 2,000 people. And I actually think that my upbringing there and my involvement in ANZAC Day was a big part of the reason that I now I'm so obsessed with this history and wanting to learn more about it, because my grandfather was from that town. He'd served in the Second World War, and his brother had been killed in the Second World War. So I grew up in an environment where we knew all about service and sacrifice. And my father was in the town band, and he used to march playing the saxophone in the town band on ANZAC Day. And there were a lot of World War I veterans back in the day and a lot of World War II veterans. And I used to march as part of the school. So I really grew up in this environment where ANZAC Day was one of the most important days of the year. And you also grew up in the bush, I think, respecting what it meant for everyone in the town. You knew all the veterans, and so it was a great day to hear their stories and to learn what was going on. So Reg Ratty, who won the VC in World War II, was also from that district. So, it was an environment where you understood what it meant to go off and fight, particularly in the big wars, the First and Second World Wars. So, yeah, I feel very grateful that I had that upbringing, because I think there's elements that come through in the bush that you don't get in the city when it comes to ANZAC Day commemoration. So for me, I feel very lucky that I grew up in a small town and got to experience ANZAC Day with the local townspeople.
How do you feel veteran support is in the year 2023 and today's day and age? Do you think there's adequate support for veterans?
It's a tough question. It's certainly a lot better than it was. I think there was a long period of time after Iraq and Afghanistan where I think you forgotten what it meant when you had veterans coming back from a war, and we didn't do a very good job at all of looking after them. And I think that's been the case after every war, Dan. I think we're brilliant at turning civilians into soldiers, but we're turning them back into civilians again. And we've neglected our service people after every war they've been off to. And people come back, greatly affected by what they see in wartime, and so much so that we don't even really call it PTSD anymore, post-traumatic stress disorder. We just call it PTS, post-traumatic stress, because it's not really a disorder. It's quite a natural way of reacting to being in the hell of combat. So I think we've always done a pretty poor job of looking after our veterans when they've come back. And I think we made the same mistakes after Iraq and Afghanistan. But I do also think that we've learnt from those mistakes, and we are doing a much better job now of looking after our veterans. And hopefully, if there's future conflicts, let's hope there's not, but if there are future conflicts where our men and women have to go off and fight, let's hope that we do a better looking after.
Something I've noticed that we do very well is education to the younger generation about the ANZACs and about our history. How do you see that? I've noticed a lot of young people attending ANZAC Day services. I'd love to get your point of view on that.
Yeah, I would always say young people get a bad rap in so many areas, but when it comes to ANZAC Remembrance, they deserve our applause because it's a unique thing in the world that young people engage in Australia so strongly with the ANZAC history, with the story of war and veterans and people going off to fight in wars. They don't do it anywhere else. And if you go to America or the UK or France or anywhere else, they're struggling with this concept that once all the World War II veterans are gone and once the Vietnam veterans are all too old, there'll be no one left to tell any of these stories. And they're seeing numbers at Remembrance Services drop off very, very quickly as veterans pass away. It's not the case at all in Australia. We have young people attending ANZAC services in greater numbers every year, and the numbers are growing. We've got young people walking battlefields as part of backpacking trips or school trips. It's just a fantastic thing to see. I think we have to be careful that young people understand what it is they're actually commemorating, because young people perhaps don't have the same perspective that previous generations had on service and sacrifice. But I think in general it's absolutely fantastic that young people embrace this story so strongly, and we should encourage it wherever we can.
And one way that the younger generation may relate to this story and this important history is through things like video games and pop culture. Is there anything upcoming relating to the ANZACs in that field that you're aware of?
Usually miss out a little bit when it comes to movies and popular culture and that sort of thing. I know there's a couple of video games that have come out that feature the ANZACs. A few years ago, I know that Battlefield 1 came out and it featured a whole Gallipoli sequence. So they do pop up from time to time. But I think it's really important. There might be people out there listening that go, "Oh, video games and movies trivialise war service," and that can be a risk. But I've got to say, I played video games and I watched movies about military stories, and that was one of the things that really encouraged me to learn more about military history. I'd play a video game about the Normandy landings, and then I'd want to go off and learn more about D-Day. So I think it's really important that technology plays a part in helping to educate and inspire young people to learn more about it. So I'm always looking out for the next war movie that comes out, or the next video game that paints an interesting perspective on the history. And I think it's a great way of engaging young people in the story.
Matt, thank you so much for your time, and we hope you enjoy your ANZAC Day this year.
Thanks, Dan. It's a pleasure.